course, the other reason we light candles in services is because we like to wax nostalgic. Horrible. No shame at all. None at all. Our story begins in prayer. Now, this is a movie we have seen. How many have never seen any of It's a Wonderful Life? Not too many, thank you. And I'm going to tell, okay, we've got a familiar text, and apparently it's a religious story, so it's appropriate for our service here. That is, people are concerned about somebody named George Bailey. Apparently he has children, because some of the voices are talking about somebody help daddy. He's in some kind of trouble. We don't know yet what. But what we see as the voices come into the movie are twinkling stars. Apparently this is where angels hang out because they're deciding whether to send help. Now this goes back to the earliest religions where the gods would come down and get involved in human affairs. So they're deciding. They're not really sure whether it's a big enough problem. Maybe we can send Clarence. We get it that he's kind of a junior member of their staff here, and okay, we're going to find out that his chance to earn his wings finally, after a long time as an angel in training, might be this story, this situation with this George Bailey fellow. Now, star worship goes way back. You know, the 12 houses of the zodiac, that's before there were 12 months and 12 apostles and 12 seats at the round table and 12 inches in a foot. Oh, this is 12. There's 12ness here, and we're paying attention to the celestial sphere. The story begins on Christmas Eve, appropriate to our season here, 1945, Bedford Falls, New York. And George Bailey is suicidal. We don't know why yet, but we do know about getting in really horrible moods. He's in some kind of a dark night of the soul. We shall see. What's the thing about angels here? Do I actually believe in literal angels? I wouldn't mind, but not really. I do believe in the better angels of our character that Dickens wrote about and Lincoln used to quote, that maybe our highest values lurk just at the margins, watching down, helping us out in a dark time. We start, when Clarence arrives, with a whole series of flashbacks. I'm thinking as a therapist that this is building a case. You know, what's the childhood experience, any trauma here, what's going on? So we start in an early winter scene where some boys are playing in the snow and a little guy, a little younger than the others, this is George Bailey's little brother Harry, 4 years younger, and he falls in the pond. Gets out to the center where it's thin and falls in. No sense, but the older boys know what to do. George jumps in, grabs him, and the other boys lie down on the ice, and get the image up there and you can see what it looks like. They know what to do to spread out the weight so that they can fish George out, and he's holding on to Harry. Fine, it works. We see what a good guy he is, what a loving older brother, that he can help out. And by the way, we have an immersion in water with a religious story. We've got some kind of initiatory baptismal moment here, and it is cold. Everybody's okay, except George gets an infection and ends up losing hearing in one ear out of his generosity. So there are sacrifices. Then we get to the drugstore. Mary Hatch is a young girl in school. She's several years younger than George, but she's got such a crush on him. And she comes into the drugstore to get some ice cream, mostly to flirt with George. Okay. She will be the major character. She's the one we're following. It's really her story. I read a commentary on this, and the name of the article was It's a Wonderful Wife. Because you will see at each key moment of the story, she's the one that solves the problems. He's the one that gets into trouble. She's the one that gets him out of trouble. Now, this is a caring friend or a beloved partner, or this is a member of a community that helps you out. It's also, if we think of it psychologically, the part of ourselves that finds the extra resources, that gets the extra idea that was off the radar screen. George gets out of high school with big dreams. He's going to see the world. He goes to get a suitcase, and they show him a small one. I don't want a suitcase for one night. I want a suitcase for 1,001 nights. He wants to go to Rome and London and Samarkand. Not the one here in town, but the one over there on the other side of the world. He is going to go to the big city, be an architect, build skyscrapers and big bridges. He's got dreams. Just before he takes off, he saves some money. He's saved his own money for college, but first he's going to travel. And his friend from high school has come back to town to see him off. Sam Wainwright is in the big city doing well, and they decide to go to the high school prom. As graduates of the high school, they're allowed. It's not their graduation. They graduated several years before, and he goes there and he sees Mary. And they dance. It's a pretty good Charleston, too. They're doing some steps here, and somebody, well, actually, it's the guy she was supposed to be dancing with. He gets ticked, and he messes with the floor, because underneath the gym floor is the pool. And George doesn't know that the pool, you see behind them there, the pool is opening up, and they back up doing a fancy step and fall in the water. We're back in the soup. This happens in this story several times, making me think it really is a baptismal theme. Now, what happens next is sad. He's got all these dreams. He's got this night date, and they manage to dry off. And in the nature of things, something going wrong turns right, because they end up in old things they found in the locker just to get dry, which really gets you away from what's called in Jungian psychology persona. That's the mask we all wear to try to look good. We've got, look in the mirror, okay, I'm presentable here. That gets all washed away when they fall in the soup. So they get down to being a little closer, and it's the best conversation they've ever had. But somebody is looking for George. He says, your father. His father's had, I don't know if it's a heart attack or a stroke, but by the time he reaches him, he's gone. His father runs a small building and loan, which is really as much a charity as a business, because he helps all the poor folks in town. Doesn't make very much money, does a lot of good. Now, George is about to see the world, and the board of this little building and loan says, any chance you'd stick around and run the place? Your father did a lot of good here, and you're really the only person that we know that could run. He's very good with people. He's good with money. He's very diligent. He could run it even though he's very young. But he wanted to travel and go off to college, and he takes the job. He steps up and he runs this little thing and does a terrific job. He finds a small parcel and subdivides it, builds very small homes that people can afford and get out of the renting. There's a landlord in town, Mr. Potter, is a real severe guy, and this is a good move. Mary shows up with the ritual, which is a loaf of bread, a bottle of wine, some salt. I've got the ritual part here. Let me read it to you. It's an Italian family, so it's bread that this house shall never know hunger, salt that life may always have flavor, and wine that joy and prosperity may reign forever. She's got the sense of the moment, and he's doing good work. His brother goes off to college with the money that George had saved for himself. He gives it to his brother. His brother comes back, met a wonderful woman. Actually, they eloped. And he's got a wonderful opportunity to go work for her family business. And George, he was going to come help with the family business, with the building and loan, but George says, no, you go take that opportunity. So he does these good things, but there are problems. I got out of order. If we can go back to the one where she's holding the money up, there's a problem in the banking business. People get scared and they come to get their money out. Well, that'll break a bank, and this is before good deposit insurance. And they don't have enough in the drawer, and that will close the whole thing down. What she has is their honeymoon money, because they were about to take off. And this is going to be a lavish time in New York, and maybe go down to the Bahamas someplace, a nice honeymoon, because he's sort of put everything off. And she thinks, but we could save the bank. And he sees what she's talking about and takes the money, and they solve the problem out of their own pocket. There's a lot of sacrifice in this story, a lot of deferred dreams, and you might think that's a sad thing, but what he's actually doing, what they're doing together in the life they have, is beautiful. Well, it's a wonderful life. Not the life we expected, but you know, there's that old saying, if you want to see God laugh, show him your plans. The plans go awry in this story, and yet it's a beautiful story. That night after the bank run, she actually manages to get a hold of an old house. I think she goes down to the tax office and promises to pay it off or something. They don't have much money, but throughout the rest of the story, they're fixing up this old house. She fixes it up for their honeymoon night, puts some travel posters up. That's all the travel they're going to be doing, is looking at those travel posters. She solves that problem. She solves the bank problem. This is the part of ourselves that's a little off the screen, a little off center, that has the ability to step in when time is needed. It's also the part that can mobilize friends, because she gets some friends to help fix up that house. Oh, by the way, his brother off having a big career. When the war starts, his brother, being a college graduate, gets a commission as a Navy pilot and a war hero, saves a troop ship. Thousands of lives are saved. George, because of his missing hearing, is running the civil defense in town. Nothing glorious, but something that needs to be done. That's the story of his life. And then something happens. Has to be in a story that something happens. Uncle Billy, who helps run the savings and loan, mostly by doing errands and things. He's not a real executive or anything, and he makes mistakes. Well, he makes a big mistake and loses a bunch of money. He's on his way to the bank, and he sees Mr. Potter there in his wheelchair, Lionel Barrymore in a terrific, sinister role. You need a great villain to have a good story. But he's got the newspaper in his lap, and Uncle Billy knows that Mr. Potter doesn't much like the Baileys. He doesn't like the competition, even though it's a tiny little operation compared to his big bank and all his real estate holding. He's a miser, and he is alone in life except for his chauffeur, who pushes his wheelchair around. The thing about miserly greed is it's about safety. It's trying to be safe enough, and you can never be safe enough. So you start controlling things, and you end up controlling people, and you get more and more alone. Well, he's got the newspaper on his lap, and Uncle Billy's a little mischievous. He knows that on the headline it says, "Local Hero," and there's a picture of Harry Bailey receiving the Medal of Honor from the President of the United States. And so he opens up the paper and says, well, what about that? Hey, Mr. Potter, how about that Bailey family? Look at that, Medal of Honor. He's just, teasing and everything, puts the paper back on his lap, mistakenly folding in the envelope with the money deposit from the savings, the building loan, and they're in trouble. It's a lot of money. It's enough to bankrupt the operation. It's enough to alert the bank investigators who are coming to do an accounting that day. It's Christmas Eve. I don't know why they're working on Christmas Eve, but anyway, they find this huge amount of money going. It's jail time. It's loss of faith. It's the end of everything. This is what throws Bailey into that terrible nightmare. Reminds me of one of my favorite jokes about the executives who are out playing golf. It doesn't fit. Wait till I finish it. Okay, and one of the CEOs mentions to his friend, we're looking for an accountant, and they're playing golf, and the friend, after a few beats, says, didn't you guys hire an accountant last year? Yeah, that's the one we're looking for. Kind of an accounting joke. I got a son-in-law who's an accountant. He did not like that joke. I don't know, no sense of humor at all. Okay, so here's the loss of face. And George goes home looking for something, and he sees his hobby corner in the living room. His hobby is building architectural models, the kind of beautiful work you would do if you worked for a big fancy architectural firm going to build a skyscraper or building. He's not an architect, but he still has the hobby, and he builds these beautiful things, and he goes over and smashes them. He's in a horrible mood. Jimmy Stewart had just been in the war. This was made right after the war, and he had PTSD. He really had a rough wartime experience, and it all came out. We saw a dark side because he'd only done very light comedies before that. But this scene is kind of mean. He snaps at the kids, and his wife's really worried about him, and she starts mobilizing, as she tends to do, to see what she can do. Meanwhile, his whole hobby corner is smashed to bits. The smashing of images has a long religious. This is iconoclasm. This is the smashing of the idols. It is a fear of the imagination, because the imagination has autonomy. It has a sort of spiritual force. If you can imagine something, you can change the world, like our story earlier. So he's smashing his old dreams. It won't help, because the imagination comes right back again. He tries to get a loan from Mr. Potter. Well, that doesn't go very well. Mr. Potter, realizing he's in trouble, just calls the police, says, be sure to check in with the bank examiners. I think there's something fishy going on over at the building and loan. He just wants to get revenge. He's just the mean force. And I don't just want to make him a villain in the story like there are bad people in the world, which there are, but it's also a story that is going on inside some writer's head. This is a part of the inner life. This is the part of ourselves that's afraid, and out of fear does things that aren't pretty. and can be the villain of our own story if we don't pay attention. Okay, this is the moment where the timeline catches up. Remember, we were in flashbacks. Now we're at the place where George Bailey is on the bridge. This is his perceived failure. He didn't actually make the mistake. Uncle Billy did. He could just sort of throw Uncle Billy under the bus. He doesn't even think that for a moment. He thinks we are going down. And it is a failure in the world's eye, but he has done all these good things his whole life. So we have to be aware that a mood is just a mood. Even when things are bleak, that's kind of a perception of something. There are other options. As you know, I studied years ago with Viktor Frankl, and he was in the concentration camp, and he said you can still search for meaning even when things are unbelievably bleak. You still have some freedom. What freedom does a person in a death camp have? He said, attitude. You still have the freedom inside your mind, how you see things, whether you see the momentary action as having any meaning or not, and that can make the difference between life and death. Well, at the moment, George Bailey is voting for death, but remember, an angel came. So he's standing at the bridge, and the angel, unseen by him, is standing behind him, looking at the scene here. He's going to jump into the icy waters, and there are rapids right there. It would be a quick death. Something happens. Clarence jumps in the water. The angel jumps, and George didn't even know he was there. He said, what's this? And what does he do? Out of instinct, dives in and saves him, because he's that kind of guy. Well, Clarence knew what he was doing. He knew that would distract him for a moment, that he would be a strong enough swimmer. If he wanted to save somebody, he could get into that rushing water and get somebody out, and did, and then he's angry. And the next scene is in the toll booth. There's a little compartment with a cot and a heater for the person taking the tolls for the bridge. A key part of this story takes place on a bridge. A bridge is a place between here and there. We're in a transition. Initiatory moments are like that. We're not quite what we used to be. He's in the process of letting go of some old hopes and dreams, and that's a rough process, and going to look at life a different way, which you don't see yet. You're in between. The toll taker takes off when Clarence starts talking about an angel being 222 years old and stuff. It's too weird for me. He's out of there. And George is in a horrible mood. And if you ever intervene with somebody who's thinking of killing themselves, they may not be very nice about it. They don't see it as a favor because they saw suicide as a way out of pain. And you have just interrupted that. You've taken away their escape route. But you do it because you're voting for tomorrow's person. You're voting for the person who would like to be around later. Today, that person isn't really. So he's in an awful mood. One of the things that George says is, I wish I was never born. And there's that Twilight Zone dimension of this story. This is an angel. He says, yeah, okay, let's have you take a look at what it would be like if you were never born. And they go back into town, which isn't called Bedford Falls anymore. It's called Pottersville, because in this alternative reality, in this multiverse, that old grouchy miser took over the whole place long ago, owns the town pretty much, named it after himself. He's got a big ego, and it's a sleazy joint with a lot of bars and some sleazy movie playing, and yeah, different reality, and nobody knows who George is. They go into his old bar, and they don't know who he is. And this is the family that he helped buy that house. They don't even own it because they didn't have the kind of business support that his little operation did. There's an old guy there, and he recognized him. It was that pharmacist that ran Mr. Gower's pharmacy where he worked as a kid. He helped him out. He was going to give a wrong prescription. Somebody would have died. Well, in this alternative reality, the child did die. And Gower did time in prison, and now he's at the town drunk, and they throw him out of the bar. All these dark things, and all the friends he helped along the way had problems that wouldn't have happened. And he goes and finds his own family home, and his mother is running a rooming house to get by because she didn't have an ambitious son to help her out after her husband died, and everything's dark. He had made a huge difference in all these lives. And he finally tracks down Mary, who has become a librarian. And never married, and they all through the movie she's really attractive, and they take her somehow makeup and unflattering clothing, it doesn't work. I have, in my previous life, was the director of library services at Pacifica, where I've taught since the 80s, and not for that many years, but I was technically for a while a librarian, and I think these are some of the most interesting people in the world. Book people have deep souls, and I take offense at the portrayal of librarians here. I must say the people on my staff weren't as tall as I was, and they used to call me Conan the Librarian. But okay, with that one little point of reservation, I love this movie, but okay. Here is the moment when he snaps. I want my life back. I want my wife back. I want my kids. I don't, and that's what the angel was doing. Try to show him how much he had mattered. He didn't end up wealthy and impressive, but he did a lot of good work. His old youthful plans had not fit his life story for a very long time. Sometimes we're the last to know. Time to change gears. Something else is going on. Regrets are mostly a waste of time. You know, self-criticism is kind of a magic trick. It's an attempt to repeal reality, as if I had done something, it would have made this huge difference. I'm not that big a deal. I'm not sure it would have. And that's just a way to be mean to ourselves without really solving problems, which sometimes we can help with. So here's the moment in this story where the rising from the grave. Here's the Christmas story. Here's the hope in the moment of darkness. That's what the winter holidays are about, light. At the time of year that is dark, light emerges and lasts longer than we expected. That's what this is about. Well, what has Mary been up to? When she saw he was in trouble, she got involved with the community. She called their friends, she called their customers, and he's been so good to them over the years. And they said, yeah, we'll help out. They actually made contributions, and she raised enough to save the bank. And her old, George's old friend, who she actually dated for a while he was being ambivalent. But anyway, they both know Sam Wainwright, who's gone off to the big city and made the big bucks. George is always comparing himself to Sam. Comparison is not a good game. Kierkegaard said social comparison is hell. It's just a way to be mean to yourself, and nothing is accomplished. It doesn't sort of help. You can get busy at today's task, or you can spend time thinking of what you should have accomplished in life. Anyway, yeah, she's the one that solves the problem. Well, more specifically, she's the one that keeps the connection with the community. It's their friends that solve the problem. George doesn't really solve it. Clarence helps him from killing himself. That's a big help. So his friends are essentially reacting to the many good needs, not the one mistake. People tend to see you for what you've done, not for what you never quite got to. Honorable character really is rewarded. The hero did not save the day in this story. Mary and his friends came through. And his brother, that's the check from the telegram saying he's going to send a check for more than they need actually to cover the problem. Okay. And then his brother shows up in uniform because they're going to have a party in honor of that Medal of Honor. He's the one that raises the toast to my brother, George, the richest man in town. Well, George doesn't really have very much money, but he is in terms of how many friends he has. And the last thing in the story is the ringing of a bell on the Christmas tree. And Zuzu, his little kid, says, you know, when a bell rings, it means an angel got his wings. And we don't see Clarence again, but there's a note from him. He's left his copy of Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer that he'd been reading from time to time throughout the story, and he's written something in it. Remember, no man is a failure who has friends. No man is a failure who has friends. Clarence is the transcendent moment, the celestial perspective on things in this story. When we are at our lowest, we might not see options. We might not remember our redeeming qualities. That feeling is not to be trusted. It is not reality, it's just a rotten mood. There are ways to get out of such pits. There are guardian angels and friends and community. And there might just be a Mary Bailey around somewhere, inside or outside. It can be a loved one, it can be part of our inner world that knows an angle we haven't thought of in our bad day. This is not a solitary hero story. The collective saves the day. Sometimes the heroic idea has to get out of the way. Old notions of who we are or should have been might not serve us. In the words of Joseph Campbell, we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. Namaste. Blessed be. And so it goes. Before we sing the next song, I have two announcements to make. On the back of your order of service, there's a notice about covenant groups. Most of you know what that is. If you don't, there are some small brochures on the back tables. This is a very central activity of the community to meet in small circles, 8 to 10 people, once a month, an hour and a half, and share, and it's structured. There are some discussion topics and things. It's very, very well, it's been put together. Pat Johnson's been organizing this for years, and it works. And the people, quite a few of the people in the room are in these groups, and a very rewarding connection over time to some of the beautiful souls that are sitting near you. Well, we're busy organizing a new group. Mary Ince has agreed to facilitate, and she's experienced at this and is going to leave the group she's been in to help start a new one. And we're leaning toward Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoon, in person, outside when it's nice and it's a good time. So what we need, if you're interested in doing this, is for you to contact Mary or myself. My email's in there, to pick a time. Tell us basically which of those you can't make. And we're also adding some people, or inviting the possibility of adding, and there's at least one Zoom, and there's some other options, but we're going to start one new one. The other announcement I want to make is about a path to membership, which we do periodically to have a couple of meetings, orientation, a little UU history and such, and those will be coming up on January 7th and 28th, right after service, 11:15 to 12:15, about in that time zone, give or take. And that will be then culminate in a little ceremony where we have to sign the book and join formally. So if you've found this is a warm place to come and be part of, and a spiritual home, look into that. If you have questions about either of these, contact me, email me, or give me a call or something. Those are, in terms of the talk, in terms of the movie, are opportunities to deepen our connection to community.